MS Now has just learned that top members of the Trump administration will head to Capitol Hill tomorrow to brief the Gang of Eight and top lawmakers on the Foreign Affairs, Foreign Relations, and Armed Services committees. Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, Pam Bondi, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, and Joint Chiefs Chairman Dan Kane will attend, according to 6 sources who are familiar. Meanwhile, MS Now has learned that House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries is set to convene every single ranking member on House committees early this week to work on a war powers resolution that the whole caucus can get behind. And Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says his caucus will also be moving ahead this week with its own resolution. We should note that war powers resolutions have already failed in the House and Senate in recent weeks because of a lack of GOP support. Joining us now, Democratic Congressman Gregory Meeks of New York. He's the ranking member on the Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, thanks for joining the show.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. We're hearing as President Trump and Senator Lindsey Graham are gaggling with reporters right now that Lindsey Graham has just said, "You just wait, Cuba." What do you think this administration has in mind after what we've just witnessed in Venezuela this weekend? Are you concerned about what comes next?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Trump is made an illegal, clearly attack on a sovereign nation. We know that Nicolas Maduro, everyone knows that he is a bad guy and a guy that prevents democracy and violated human rights. But we also know we have the rule of law. So we have to talk about that. And we know that he won't stop, because when you look at what the president has talked about with his national security strategy, saying that we're going to just take over the Western Hemisphere. Well, that's part of Cuba. That could be Colombia. That could be Mexico. And then that will just take us into war after war and cost the American people billions of dollars. And who's going to take over what? There's no plan at all, as there is no plan right now as to what takes place in Venezuela after this attack. We should be talking about democracy. He's not talking about democracy. It seems clearly that this will continue as if this is the days of colonialization. The same thing I see on the continent of Africa right now. The strikes in Nigeria, and I hear the talks about doing certain things and various other countries where there's minerals. We should have learned the lesson that colonization does not work in people, especially what we've done in our history in South America.
Congressman, let me come back to the breaking news that we had about at the top of the hour about the meetings that are going to take place, the briefings that are going to take place tomorrow on Capitol Hill. What questions do you have? What are you going to ask the members of this administration, perhaps even the Joint Chief of Staff, about either the operation, the legality of the operation? What do you want to know that has not been answered or explained as of yet?
What's the plan after? If you don't have a plan, then you plan to fail. And that's what's going to cause the American people to suffer also. We've been down this path before, as you know, in Iraq, when we saw mission accomplished. That was not accomplished. So what is the plan? One of the things that I can recall that President Obama said after Congress did not act and do what I believe we should have done then with reference to Libya, was he did not concentrate and focus enough beforehand on what would take place the day after. And so, as you've heard from Donald Trump at his press conference, and also the remarks from Secretary Rubio and others, they don't have a plan. They're going back and forth among themselves. There is no plan in that regards, other than what Donald Trump articulated, that Donald Trump, will become the president, I guess, of Venezuela, because he said we will take it over and take Venezuelan oil for our benefit.
Well, Congressman, on that, it seemed like what the president was arguing yesterday in that presser was we're going to get the oil and it's going to make Venezuelans richer and it's going to make us richer. So the benefits are going to flow down. And It seems that's part of the argument to the American people at a time, of course, when here domestically so many are struggling to just pay their bills. They're fearful about their rising health care costs and slow wage growth, or if they're out of a job, they're having a hell of a difficult time trying to find one right now as employers are sort of frozen with all the confusion over tariffs in the economy. So is there any truth to that, that if Trump's able to get his hands on Venezuelan oil, we'll all get rich?
He's not going to make Americans richer. No, he's going to make a few of his friends richer. That's what he's been doing all over the planet. So those who are his friends that are in the oil industry, they will make a heck of a lot of money. And you hear him talking about how whatever money that they put out, we will reimburse them. And at the same time, when we're talking about health care for average everyday Americans, making sure that they the tax credits that they get for the Affordable Care Act continues. He wants to get rid of that. And for the average everyday American, you get nothing. But if you one of his oligarch friends, as we've seen throughout his presidency, you get everything. And that is not what this is supposed to be about. And I think that, we've got to, as we get back to Washington, D.C., those are the things we're going to continue to talk about. Affordability, making sure people have health care, making sure people can be able to buy a home or rent and have affordable rent. So those are the things that we still got to be focused on. So how is he going to take over Venezuela and help the Venezuelan people when he's not helping the American people? That's what he should be working on, by making sure every American has health care.
Well, according to Jim Jordan, your colleague in Congress, he summed it up by saying this. Take a listen. I'll let you hear it for yourself, and then I'll get your thoughts.
I trust the president to make decisions that are in the best interest of Americans, of our country. I trust Secretary Rubio. I trust Secretary Hicks. I trust President Trump in making decisions that, again, are in the best interest of the American people.
Does that sound like a member of Congress to you who understands that he has a constitutional obligation for oversight and upholding the Constitution as opposed to trusting individuals?
No, it doesn't sound like a member of Congress. It doesn't sound like you're upholding the responsibility that you've taken an oath to. The legislative branch of government is a separate but equal branch of government with the responsibility of having oversight of the executive branch of government. That's our job, not to bow down to a king. The very basic fact of why we are the United States of America is running away from giving one person absolute authority to do whatever he or she wants to do. That is not who we are. That's what Russia is. That's what China is. And I don't think we want to be another Russia or China where we don't have any accountability to whoever may be president, or make the president of the United States accountable, as well as other agencies and institutions that we have in our country.
So, Congressman, what can Democrats do? I mean, I know you're in the minority and it's difficult to get much done, but what can Democrats do to try to take back some of their congressional authority, to show the American people that you're not just the Duma in Russia that just rubber stamps whatever Putin wants?
That's exactly right. And I think that, we had two War Powers Acts that we put forward right before this illegal action, and they fell, but by a small amount. But I think that now we need to come with another one, very specifically given the facts that have taken place. And many of the so-called MAGAs and those individuals who talk about make America great, they should also now be joining us to say that we're going to hold the president accountable for his promises of not engaging in additional wars, of not spending money for wars around the world in that regards. So I would hope that we can put something together, and we're working very hard. I know all of the members who are ranking members, we're trying to work together to see if we can put something together in that regards, talk to a number of our Republican colleagues to see that if they are willing to stand up to do their job. And if they're not, then we need to be in the streets, even in their districts, so their constituents know very clearly where they are in regards to this issue.
I got to ask you one quick question before we go, Congressman. It was some comments that Donald Trump made aboard Air Force One this evening. And it's something that at the beginning of his term, a lot of people kind of dismissed as a joke, and that was taking over Greenland. He said on Air Force One tonight, we're going to worry about Greenland in 2 months. Let's talk about Greenland in 20 days. We need Greenland from a national security situation. It's something he also brought up in his interview with The Atlantic earlier today, saying we need Greenland. What do you make of the way this administration is talking about invading, taking control of, annexing a part of a European sovereign nation and ally, that of Denmark?
Look, it is absolutely insane. It is a threat to NATO and our NATO alliances. For over 75 years, we came together to make sure that we would work and support, and America would lead because of who and what our values are and how our values were shared with many of our European allies and others around the world. This is how we were able to forge a peace and have peace in that regards. He is trying to destroy it. And when you look at the national security strategy that he's laid out, where he has said that, well, we're going to dominate the Western Hemisphere in those areas. Well, that just says then you're going to divide the world up. And what Vladimir Putin's doing, who's saying that he doesn't want NATO to exist because he says that is negative to Russia, or China, who does not want Taiwan to exist, it means that you will have the authoritarian governments and the United States would become one. United States would be just like Russia, China, and North Korea. And as their leaders who believe that that's what they should do, that's who we would be. But I have a firm belief that the people of the United States of America will not allow that to happen. And the members of the House of Representatives and the Senate and members of Congress, we need to make sure that we are articulating that. And then the way that we ultimately hold them accountable is on election day. So we cannot allow this kind of mentality and this kind of strategy that has been articulated by this president of the United States to be the law of the land.